What happens when a neighborhood's self-appointed guardian crosses a line that can't be uncrossed? In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where manicured lawns and white picket fences hid secrets as deep as the roots of the old oak trees, one woman's obsession with control spiraled into a tragedy that no one saw coming. This is the story of Karen Whitaker, a name that would soon be whispered with fear, pity, and disbelief. It started innocently enough. Karen, a 40-something divorcee with a penchant for order, had always been the unofficial queen of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Her clipboard was her scepter, her sharp tongue her sword. She patrolled the neighborhood with an eagle eye, noting every infraction. A mailbox slightly askew, a hedge an inch too tall, a car parked a hair too close to a fire hydrant. To Karen, these weren't just rules, they were the glue holding civilization together. Most neighbors rolled their eyes and complied, too tired to argue with her relentless energy. But not everyone bowed to her reign. Enter Marcus Reed, a new resident who moved into the cul-de-sac at the end of Maple Drive. Marcus was a quiet man, a retired mechanic with a weathered face and a penchant for restoring vintage motorcycles in his garage. His yard wasn't perfect, dandelions speckled the lawn, and his porch bore the scars of a life well lived. Karen took one look at his property and declared war. Notes appeared on Marcus's door, citing HOA violations that didn't exist. Fines piled up, though no one could recall the HOA board approving them. Whispers spread that Karen was making it personal, but no one knew why. "I'm Daniel Carter, and my wife, Elena, is not your average suburban mom. She's a combat instructor for the Navy SEALs. A woman who can disarm a man twice her size in seconds and teach elite soldiers how to survive in the worst conditions." Elena didn't care much for Karen's petty crusades. "Let her play her games," she'd say, her voice calm but edged with steel. "She's not worth our time." But I could see the tension in Elena's jaw when Karen's notes started appearing on our door, accusing us of unapproved exterior paint or excessive noise from our kids' basketball hoop. Karen was testing us, and I wondered how long Elena's patience would hold. The twist came in the form of a man named Carl. He showed up one humid July evening, dressed in a crisp security uniform with a badge that gleamed under the streetlights. Karen introduced him at the next HOA meeting as the new neighborhood patrol officer, hired to enforce compliance. The room buzzed with unease. No one had voted for this. No one had even heard of a budget for a private security force. But Karen's voice drowned out the murmurs, her eyes glinting with authority. "Carl's here to keep us safe," she declared, "to protect our property values." Carl was an enigma. He was broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a stare that made your skin crawl. He drove a black SUV with tinted windows, patrolling the streets at odd hours. Kids stopped playing outside. Neighbors closed their blinds. Marcus, however, didn't back down. When Carl confronted him about his motorcycles, accusing him of disturbing the peace, Marcus laughed. "This is my home," he said. "You're not the law." That's when things got ugly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I was grilling in the backyard when I heard shouting. Elena was already moving, her instincts kicking in before I could process the noise. We ran to the front yard and saw Carl, his face red, pointing a gun at Marcus. Karen stood behind him, arms crossed, a triumphant smirk on her face. Marcus's hands were raised, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You're no cop," he spat. "You're her lapdog." Neighbors gathered, phones out, recording the standoff. I could feel the air crackling with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Elena stepped forward, her voice low but commanding. "Put the gun down, Carl. Now." He didn't move. His grip on the pistol tightened, and for a heartbeat, I thought he'd shoot. That's when Elena's training took over. In a blur, she closed the distance, disarmed him with a fluid twist, and pinned him to the ground. The gun skidded across the pavement, landing at Karen's feet. Karen's face went pale. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "He's protecting us." But the neighbors weren't listening. Someone had called 911, and within minutes, real police officers arrived. They cuffed Carl, who was sweating and stammering. his badge suddenly looking cheap under the flashing lights. The cops ran his ID, and the truth unraveled. Carl wasn't a security officer. He wasn't even licensed. He was Karen's cousin, a drifter with a rap sheet for fraud and a penchant for playing dress-up. The gun? Stolen. The SUV? Rented with a maxed-out credit card. The neighborhood was in shock, but Karen wasn't done. She turned on Marcus, accusing him of provoking Carl, of ruining Willow Creek with his disrespect. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of rage. She believed, truly believed, that she was the victim, that her vision of a perfect community had been betrayed. The cops didn't buy it. They took her in for questioning, and the truth spilled out like a dam breaking. Karen had orchestrated everything. The fake fines, the invented rules, the security high-reshed funneled HOA funds into her own account to pay for Carl's charade. She'd targeted Marcus because he reminded her of her ex-husband, a man who'd never bent to her will. It was personal, petty, and pathological. The HOA board dissolved her position that night, and the police charged her with embezzlement and endangerment. Carl faced worse: illegal possession of a firearm and impersonating an officer. But the story doesn't end with justice served. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't sue. Instead, he invited the neighborhood to his garage the next weekend. He fired up his old jukebox, cracked open beers, and let the kids ride his restored motorcycles around the cul-de-sac. It was his way of healing the rift Karen had torn open. Elena and I were there, watching our kids laugh as Marcus revved an engine, his smile brighter than I'd ever seen. For a moment, Willow Creek felt like a community again. Then came the final twist, the one that broke my heart. A week later, Marcus was gone. Not moved gone. A heart attack, sudden and silent, took him in his sleep. The man who'd stood up to Karen's tyranny, who'd faced a gun with nothing but courage, was stolen by something no one could fight. At his memorial, the neighborhood gathered again, this time in silence. Elena spoke, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "He reminded us what it means to stand tall," she said. "Not just against bullies, but for each other." Karen didn't show. She was out on bail, living with her sister across town, shunned by the community she tried to control. I heard she cried when she learned of Marcus's death, but I don't know if it was guilt or just another performance. Maybe she'd never know herself. As I write this, I'm sitting on my porch watching the sun set over Willow Creek. The lawns are still neat, the fence is still white, but something's changed. We're not just neighbors anymore, we're survivors of a storm we didn't see coming. Karen's reign is over, but Marcus's absence lingers. A reminder that heroism doesn't always win the war, only the battle. And sometimes that's enough to break your heart. ND.